Hi guys, my name is Swamini and I'm the founder at shaktiki.org. It's a digital marketing agency. And I have decided to do this series. It's basically I'll be talking to some of my friends who have really interesting careers. Okay, my first guest today is Andrea Tome, and she is a Spanish author. And we'll be discussing about her books, everything in details, and what it is like to work in publishing and also be an author of so many books. So let's get started. So Andrea, I have known you for like 4 years now. We did our masters together, and at that point you were already an author, which is quite interesting for me because I got into the course thinking that publishing a book would be my end goal. And there you were, we were like 22, and you had already published like I think a couple of books.
Yeah.
So I want to ask, like, what was that point in your life when you had this thing like that you wanted to become a writer, and from that point on how did you go about like publishing your first book? Because I feel that a lot of people are there who have this thing like, okay, I want to write a book, but they never get to the end of it. So can you please enlighten us with your journey?
Yeah, sure. So like my family, we have always read a lot, and like when I was a kid, like my aunties would always like tell me stories and stuff like that. So I was always kind of like in that sort of environment, and I was always like writing when I was a kid. But I feel like I didn't realize that you could like be an author until I was a teenager. And thankfully back then in Spain there were like many like contests and literary prizes for young authors. So it was like a very exciting moment, and also because like it was the start of social media, so there were like a lot of like communities of like young writers. So we all like cheered on each other and like motivated each other, and like we all participated in the same contests. So that was when I like took it seriously, and I wanted to be like a really good writer, and I really wanted to get published. And I feel like I was really lucky because when I was only 19 I won a literary contest, and the prize was the publication of the novel. And the novel that I wrote was partially inspired by my own experiences. When I was 16 to like 20s, I had an eating disorder, and I found it so hard to like find books that like really reflected that, like in an honest way or in a way that I found relatable. So I kind of wrote that book, and like I wasn't sure if it was going to be good enough or like something that people would like to read, because it was like very graphic. Like I didn't hold anything, like I showed the worst parts of having an eating disorder. And yeah, thankfully it did win. And I feel because there weren't so many books that were written from like an experience, it became like really popular in Spain and in Latin America, and that allowed me to continue publishing more books.
That's a really interesting intake. And, talking about that, I think as writers, I feel that we have this gift or talent, some might say, that, we can convey a certain message in a, like, better than most people, I would say. And I feel that
Yeah.
as writers, I think it becomes, in a way, our responsibility to talk about certain things which other people might not be able to, that freely. So what, and I know like you have already written about like your topics, the topics that you write on in your books. I think those are very influential for teenagers and such. So what is like going forward? What goal do you have with your books? Like what is it that you want to achieve? Yeah, in that domain.
Sure. Um, right now, my biggest dream, like book-wise, would be to get translated. I think because I studied languages and I love like learning new languages. I love learning other cultures. It would be way more exciting for me to like get published in English as a translation than like finding an agent here, because a lot of people ask me, oh, since you're bilingual, like you already have some contacts in publishing, like why don't you try to publish in English? And to me it's just, I really like the community of readers that I already have, and I find that the community in Spain is so exciting that I would rather be translated for the books that have been already been published in Spain first than being published here first. I feel like, I don't know, the reading community is very different. And I feel like a translation is so special because it's basically a collaboration between yourself and the translator. And especially if it's a language that I can read, like English or French, I would be like really curious to see how the translator like interpreted my words, or why did they choose like a certain word over another, or like a certain expression over another. So that hasn't happened yet, but I really want it to happen, and I think that would be like really, really exciting.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I looked up your books on Amazon and it is available. I think the Kindle edition is available in India, but obviously
Yeah,
it's in Spanish, and I feel like really bad that I can't read those books just because I can't speak Spanish. But obviously, once we have these books translated, which I'm really waiting for, then it's and obviously with English you can reach out to like lots and lots of audience, which we have seen with Netflix as well now. Like the Korean dramas and all are coming up, and then it just opens up like so many things, like language, without any like borders and things like that. And I know that these kind of topics that you write on, let's say like eating disorder, and a lot of people face it in like other countries also, but yeah, I mean, yeah, I understand when you talk about like languages and translations. Okay, so we met during our course in MA in Creative Writing and Publishing at Kingston University, London. Now, okay, so you were already an author before that course, and my goal was to become an author. And I haven't gotten to that point yet. I want to eventually, but I'm not there yet, because obviously with work and all, we'll get to
yeah.
that later, like how to balance this. But what value do you think, like, okay, going in, you were already a published author. What made you choose to do a degree in creative writing? And after your course, how useful do you think it was for you?
Sure. So I think because I also studied literature as a BA, I have always wanted to like be better, and because I read a lot and I studied a lot of literature, I'm very aware of like my weak points, or like basically I can really see like the distance between what I'm writing right now and the kind of level that I want to achieve at some point. So I always love to keep like reading about writing and like keep learning and try different techniques. And for me also it was really interesting because I only had written a couple of things in English before going to my MA, although I was bilingual before. So it was very interesting for me to like try to write in English and be graded by like native English speakers, which is not the same as being graded by like a Spanish teacher that's bilingual as well, but you don't get the same sort of nuance. So that was a bit scary for me because I thought, oh my God, I'm going to be like the worst in this class. But it was a really positive experience. I ended up having a short story published in the university magazine, and that was like, I'm super proud of that. I feel like that it's so cool because English is not my first language, and although now it's my everyday language, like I feel there's always like a certain, you might be like 99% fluent in your second language, but I feel like you are never like completely 100%. So that was really cool for me. And definitely, I feel like, although I work in publishing now, I definitely feel that the creative writing part of my MA was way more useful for me than the publishing part of my MA.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's a really good point, actually. Being critiqued by English writers, because our professors were also authors of certain books.
Mhm.
And that's a really good point. And especially, I think, the thing we had with reflections, something like after the course and after the
Yeah.
submission. And I would just like, I don't know, in publishing course modules mainly, I would just like write something, and then I get results, and then they were like, now reflect upon it. I'm like, this is so hard. It's like I should have known about these things before I,
Yeah.
sat for the exam. So yeah, I mean, it was a really good experience. And I think one of the biggest thing is like you managed to find a job in the publishing industry, which you like, I don't know, like a lot of people know that, but it's a very like a compact and saturated kind of market. And I remember, and the reason I gave up was when I was very desperate for finding an internship. I went to an independent publisher and I was like, you know what, I really need this for my visa, and can you please, I'm ready to work full time, like free of cost, you don't have to pay me anything. And still they said no. They were like, no, we can't, it's like unpaid internships and things like that, we don't allow that, blah blah blah. And I was like, okay, I don't have any other way to get into the industry. But you have done that, you have gotten a job. So I want you to please talk about that experience of yours. And also, like, with job, you have managed to write more books and publish more books. So how do you manage that? Because I personally am like, after my job, I can't be bothered about anything. I just want to like Netflix and chill and just go to bed. So how do you manage that?
Sure. So first, my journey in publishing, it was definitely very hard. I did a couple of unpaid internships. Then I got my first paid gig, and it was a nightmare. It was like a really tiny publishing house. In the office, it was literally only the CEO and me, and everyone else was like freelance. And I was hired as an editorial assistant, but basically I was the help for everything. They got me like typesetting, like designing covers, like doing a lot of things that weren't in my job description. And I sucked at it. I was so bad. So after 6 months, they didn't renew my contract because I was up to here. It was so stressful. Then I was 3 months without a job, and that was so hard because I didn't know if I should go back to Spain. I was basically living off my like savings that I had from writing. So that was really hard. I spent like 3 months just like doing thousands of CVs a day, and it was so hard. Then I got another paying gig at Hachette. It was only for 1 month, but I was so desperate. I was like, this is great. So that was really interesting. It was in contracts and rights. And thankfully, while I was doing that, I interviewed for Bonnier, which is the company I'm working in now. I interviewed for international sales assistant, and I got to the very last interview stage. There were only two people, me and another girl, and they went for the other girl. So I was really like heartbroken because I only had like 1 week left of my Hachette contract. So I was really desperate again. But a really cool thing that happened is that when they told me the feedback that, oh, we really liked you, but we went from the other girl, they were like, oh, we passed on your contact details to a colleague of mine who works in UK sales because he's looking for an assistant. And I told him that you have like a really interesting like profile. So a couple of days later, my previous manager like sends me an email and he's like, oh, do you want to grab a coffee? And I went to grab a coffee with him, and it was like a very informal job interview. Like he tried to disguise it as a conversation, but halfway he would like say, like he would ask me like interview questions like, oh, what are your strengths? What do you want to do with your career? So he really liked me, thankfully. And then he invited me for a formal interview with himself and the man who is my current manager. And since then, I have been working in sales for 1 year, and it has been great. I think it's a really great company. And I feel like because they are a Swedish company, they kind of like have different values and ways of working. They are more chill and laid back than like the other English companies I've worked with. So I feel like that really has helped me like balance my office job with my writing. Although it's true that usually I don't write every single day. So usually maybe I get like this really like motivated like mindset, and I write nonstop for a couple of months, and I finish one or two novels, and then I don't write at all the rest of the year because I'm very like blocked mentally. So basically I have these spurts of energy and I use them and I create a lot in a short period of time. But then I spend like so many months not doing anything, writing wise.
How long does it take you to like finish a novel?
So usually depends on the length, of course, but usually between 1 month and 4 months is what I'm used to. Because as I said, like um it's very hard for me to like concentrate, but when I get like really interested in the topic the novel is about, I get very anxious about finishing it and like I want to continue. So when I'm writing, I usually write a lot and very fast, and then, as I said, I spent many months without doing anything creative.
Yeah, I can imagine that. My next question is in relation to this is, what is your advice for like budding authors? Because for me it's like sitting in one place and thinking about writing like 40,000, 50,000 words for a novel. It's like, oh my god, it's like such a huge task, and then that overwhelms me. And also one, okay, so not just about like from what time do you give yourself like a time limit to like finish a novel like 40,000 words in like this period of time, but also like characters. Do you discover your
Yeah,
characters when you are just you have already begun writing and as you're writing it, or beforehand do you already know like, okay, I'm going to have five characters and this is going to be their start and this is going to how the lives will end or something like that?
sure. So when I write, I always like to have like a plan before. And there are some writers that are like really strict about those plans and they follow them religiously. For me, they're kind of like just a guideline. So I need to have something aside so I can check it when I get like really blocked and I'm like, oh my god, what do I write next? So I always have kind of like yeah, kind of like a little bit of about the characters, where the plot is going to be. But then when I start writing, I like to take it like very organically. If while I'm writing, like the characters make more sense if they do different things, or like if the plot goes in a different way, I just change the plan. And what I found like really helps me is I stopped counting the words that I'm writing, because before I would be like, oh, I want to write so many words a day. And I found that that really like stopped my creativity because I was so set on reaching that goal. And like I felt like many times I would have like a good writing day and I would be like really proud and be like, oh, I wrote a lot, and then I would count the words and they would be less than I thought, and I would get like really depressed and be like, oh my god, I'm never going to finish this. So now I try to think like as in chapters. So I try to, my chapters are usually short, so I try to write at least one chapter a day, because I kind of see it like you have this episode that you finish. If it's 2,000 words or 3,000 words, that's amazing. If it's only 1,000, that's great. Like it doesn't have to be a certain limit. It's just what the particular scene tells you to. And I found that way, even though I'm not counting the words, I write much faster and I don't doubt myself so much.
Yeah, I think that's a really great advice, that we don't have to like self critique so much, because I feel that when that happens, eventually, I don't know, like progress stops and things like that. And it's important that, you're celebrating like little wins along the way
Yeah.
and things like that. So that's a really great advice. I have one final question. Is
Yeah.
there a book, like a new book that you're working on right now?
Yeah. So right now I'm writing a very different novel from the rest. And the rest I've written have either been contemporary, realism, or maybe with a couple of magical elements or history. What I'm writing now is a vampire novel, and I'm so excited about it. I love horror and I love vampires, but I was a bit afraid of like entering the horror genre because I feel it's, I think two things are very hard with writing: making people laugh and making people scared. I always found that for me, making people laugh was kind of easy, but I wasn't sure that I would be able to make people scared. So that's really exciting for me. And yeah, hopefully people should be reading it soon.
Yeah, I'm really excited for that. And that makes me think like you have got a really good range there, because comedy is obviously different and then horror is completely different. So, it's like kudos to you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for talking to me today. This is the first one, obviously. So I will make sure that in the description of this video, we have all the links, like Amazon links to your books. So all the interested readers can just click on that and then, grab a book from there. Do you have any final words before we close this off?
Sure, just either for publishing or for writing, don't give up. Both are very competitive industries and you're going to face rejection a lot. But if you continue, and I feel like it's so important to believe in yourself and be your own cheerleader and like be aware of what your strengths are and play them up. For both of them, it's definitely a hard road, but it's a possible one. And I'm sure that if I manage to publish and find a job in publishing, which I feel was harder than publish books, everyone else can as well.
Yeah, yeah. That's great advice, Andrea. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.